So it's that time of year again. It's the time of year where everyone's talking about their favourite whiskey of 2020. And so I thought I would do the same, but I'm going to talk about my top 5 whiskies of 2020. Now these are whiskies that are generally affordable, but fantastic malts. So grab a dram, grab a seat, and let's... So 2020 has been a pretty crazy year. For me personally, we had our baby in just as level 4 lockdown was happening in New Zealand, and I wasn't even sure if I was going to be able to attend the birth of the baby, but lucky it all turned out okay. But I know for many of you, you've had lockdowns throughout the year. You haven't been able to go to your favourite restaurant or your favourite quality pub. And so what's happened is you've brought quality into your home. And a great way to bring quality into your home is through a great single malt whiskey. So these whiskies from this list I've made, they're not, whiskeys to do shots with or add Coke or ginger ale. These are quality malts. These are ones to slow down, take your time, enjoy the whiskey, enjoy the complexity. They're mainly from smaller kind of distilleries with really, really great malts. So the first whiskey is the Deanston 12. So the Deanston 12 has become a really popular malt in recent times, especially after it was Ralphie's Whisky of the Year last year, and it was also Roy's Distillery of the Year in 2017. It can be sometimes hard to find now because it's often sold out, but it's still reasonable value, and I can kind of see why there's so much hype around it. And that's why I had to put it in my list, even though it's become quite popular. It ticks a lot of the boxes. So first of all, it's a Highland whiskey. It's from the biggest region in Scotland. And then its cask, it's mainly aged in ex-bourbon casks. So you're not going to get those sort of dried fruit flavors from it. You're going to get more of those bourbony, malty kind of flavors in this whiskey. It also has an age statement, 12 years old. It's great to see age statements being put on bottles, a lot of bottles of whiskies again. There's sort of a trend where a lot of non-age statements came out. The thing is, it just doesn't tell you as much information for us whiskey geeks about the whiskey. It's just one little extra thing that, we can look at and we can know a little bit more about the whiskey before we try it. And then it's unchill filtered, which is great. It means there's more. This is a debated topic, but they clearly state it on here, and a lot of distilleries are really pro it because they think that when you chill filter, it doesn't go that cloudiness, but by doing that, it often can remove some of the oils and some of the kind of flavors and esters and stuff from the whiskey. And so, this is going to be a full flavored whiskey, and also its natural color. So when we look at the bottle, we know that the color we're seeing here is the actual color that it came out of the cask, and it hasn't had caramel coloring added to it, which is great as well because with wine and stuff, you often can look at the color of the wine. You can judge a lot about it just by the color, whereas a whiskey that's kind of been made quite difficult because so many distilleries have added coloring to their whiskey. And often if you see a really saturated red whiskey and it doesn't have the words natural color on it, you just got to be just a bit skeptical about whether or not that's actually the color that it's been caused by the cask. Yeah, so this is a really fantastic malt. I really love it. It's a really well-rounded malt. It's not like super punchy, it's not like super sherried or super smoky. It's just a really rounded, nice whiskey, which makes it quite easy to drink quite quickly. It's quite easy to go down one of these bottles quite quickly. But yeah, it's very moreish. It keeps taking you back to the bottle. And a lot of people talk about how distilleries have got worse over time. It's not like what it used to be. The whiskies, it used to be so much nicer and now they've just ruined it, and it's just, but not Deanston. I think distilleries like Deanston, Arran are actually whiskies that have got better over time. With each year, it's almost like the whiskies are getting more complex and more interesting. And they're using good quality wood, they're using great stills, and they're just very, very tasty whiskies. And also it's bottled at 46%, which always keeps me interested when I see a whiskey bottled at 46%, because that means it's got sort of a really decent amount of flavor and you're not forced to try kind of a watered down 40% whiskey. But if you want to bring it down to what is accustomed to your palate, you can. You've got the choice to do it. Whereas with a 40% whiskey, you wouldn't have that choice. So great bottling strength, ticks a lot of the boxes. Deanston is a fantastic malt. Let's just have a little try. Yes, you get a lot of like maltiness on this one, a lot of hay, the cereal, that vanilla, like almonds, definite almonds, like a little bit of white chocolate, honey, and on the palate. It's really, really nice malt. It's just the maltiness I really love about this malt. Cereal notes, that sort of oats, that vanilla, the woodiness. And this is because it's just been aged in bourbon. It doesn't have a lot of those fruity notes that some of the sherried whiskies have, but they must be using really good casks because it's just got a really Moorish nose and Moorish palate. Yeah, a little bit of caramel now, a little bit of toffee, but still, yeah, mainly that kind of hay bale maltiness. This is one of those whiskies, you know, if you've ever been to the distillery and you've sort of walked around the distillery before and they've given you a tour, there's a smell of the distillery. You can smell the mash bill and the malt all being, you know, mashed up and all that sort of thing. And this is kind of the smell you're getting a little bit. It just feels like you're there, you know, like the barley's all been picked and it's all been, anyway, great whiskey. Let's get on to the next whiskey, and that is the Lagavulin 8. So I just remembered that I didn't have any water. So I've got my whiskey jug. It's very important to have this, especially with whiskies bottled at a higher strength. And this is one you'll definitely need a little bit of water for, to open up that whiskey, open up those flavors, just like airing a wine. Adding a few drops of water to your whiskey will give you a better experience, especially with stuff bottled at a higher strength. Anyway, let's talk about the Lagavulin. Lagavulin is a fantastic malt. I gave this the Lagavulin 16, I said was in my other video, the top whiskey to have at Christmas time. It's from Islay, the Isle of Islay, and Islay's kind of known for smoky whiskies, and this is one of the big names. But the main hero whiskey of Lagavulin, the one that most people know about, is the 16-year-old. So why have I got the 8-year-old? Surely, you know, doesn't age mean it won't be as good as the 16? And that's the thing about age, is it's not necessarily always better, it's just your preference, right? And also it's got an age statement, and this is fantastic. An age statement on an 8-year-old is great. It means it's very bold of the distillery, because a lot of people think, oh, that's a low number, that must mean it's bad. But with smoky whiskies, often the younger the whiskey means that it can actually be more punchy, it can be more smoky, because peat is the first flavor to diminish over time. And then other flavors from the cask will start coming out. So it's casks, it's only in ex-bourbon casks. And Lagavulin, the 16, which is kind of the hero whiskey, is aged in ex-sherry casks and ex-bourbon casks. So this one you're mainly just getting the bourbon kind of flavors, similar to what the Deanston was like before in just bourbon casks. A few more details: is it unchill filtered? I don't actually know, I'm not sure. Is it natural color? I mean, it seems like it is. I'll just pour myself a dram. Yeah, I can't see that any colouring has been added to that. It definitely looks like a natural, nice straw colour. This is a great colour. I love seeing this colour. So let's just have a little dram. Yeah, such a fantastic nose. That spirity thing. And that's the thing about it being a younger whiskey, is that it tells you more about the spirit, about the stills, about how they made the whiskey, not just about the cask it was in. You are getting those ex-bourbon notes as well, the vanilla, that kind of hay, cereal. And then on top of all that, there's the smoke. A tar smoke, like on a road tar seal, and also like smoked fish. And barbecue sauce. Often with barbecue sauce, you get that same sort of smell. Very bitter malt, but like an IPA. Very salty, saline, and the finish is long. As with most smoky whiskies, you can still taste it. It's got a decent balance, it's quite oily, and it leaves a sort of aftertaste of that saltiness. Also kind of a tea, there's a tea note there as well. So I would really recommend the Lagavulin 8-year-old. It's one of my top whiskies of 2020. And now for the next whiskey, the Glencadam 10-year-old. So the Glencadam 10, and I've got two bottles here. I've got the Glencadam 15 and just a miniature of the Glencadam 10. But I'm going to do a video comparing these two soon and sort of about what independent bottlings are, because if you're just getting into whiskey, you've probably never really seen a bottle like this, and how can that be a Glencadam when this has got the Glencadam logo on it, and who's old particular, you know, it can be kind of confusing. So I'm going to do a video talking about why people buy independent bottlings and why people just buy from the distillery and what the difference is there. But today we're just talking about the 10-year-old, because this is the one that's available. This is the one that's easy to find. It's good value. And I think Glencadam is probably one of the most underrated whiskies in all of Scotland. It's a whiskey that even a lot of people into whiskey haven't really heard of, because I mean, it is a small distillery. It's a small family run distillery, but it's a fantastic malt and it has been getting some really good reviews recently. And this is a Highland malt, so same as the Deanston. But the things about Highlands, even though they're Highlands, they can actually be further away from each other than Speyside and Islay. And so it's got a lot of things going for it. It's got an age statement, it's 10-year-old. It's aged in ex-bourbon casks, and it's a really great example of a well-rounded light bourbon. You know, it's similar to the Deanston. It's not going to be a punchy sherry or a punchy smoke, but it's going to be a well-rounded, really nice, complex, subtle whiskey that I think, you know, you should definitely look out for. And it's bottled at 46%. So again, that's kind of my sweet spot. That's the bottling strength I really, really like. And they're really proud of it. On this bottle here, they've got, you can read on the very, very small writing, it's unchilled, filtered, and no added colouring. So you know that the colour of this whiskey, it's the same colour as when it came out of the cask. Yeah, and it just ticks a lot of those boxes. Let's pour ourselves a dram. And I'm just going to add a tiny, tiny drop. So on the nose. You're definitely getting, it's definitely a spirit-driven malt. You know, it's not all about the wood. You're getting zestiness, but it's sort of like a grapefruit zestiness rather than like a lime or a lemon. It's very polite malt. It's very subtle. You know, you wouldn't think this is a 46% whiskey. And you get a lot of those herbs, definitely dried herbs. You know, when you get those packs of kind of mixed dried herbs, it's definitely like that. And on the palate, very savory whiskey. Getting more of those herbal notes, tiny bit of saltiness. It's quite bitter. Yeah, a really subtle but complex whiskey. And a whiskey that probably should be a better recognised whiskey. And now on to the next whiskey, the Kilkerran 12-year-old. So the Kilkerran 12-year-old, and there's been a lot of hype recently about the Kilkerran 8-year-old, which is a cask strength, which is a whiskey I would have loved to have tried, but I haven't been able to get hold of it in New Zealand. But the 12-year-old is like the standard bottling, and it's a fantastic whiskey. And it's from the Glengyle distillery, which is a sister distillery of Springbank. And when you're a sister distillery of Springbank, you know you're going to get a pretty quality malt. It's got an age statement, 12-year-old. The casks, it's aged in, I think 70% it's in ex-bourbon and 30% in sherry. So you're getting a little bit of sherry in this one. It's bottled at 46%. It's always a big tick for me when I see something bottled at 46%. It's from Campbelltown, the region of Campbelltown, which is a really interesting region. It used to be one of the biggest regions in Scotland. And after World War I, it's no longer, but there's some really good distilleries there, and you can watch more about that in my whiskey region video. Even though, I mean, it might not be the best designed, they probably haven't got a big marketing team designing it, don't be put off just by the design of the whiskey. I know I can, because I work in advertising and that sort of thing. Just because it's basic doesn't mean the whiskey's basic. You know, it's that classic case of don't judge a book by its cover, and any whiskey fan will tell you this is a really good whiskey. One of the really good things about this malt is it kind of changes as you get through the bottle. The complexity changes from when you start to when you finish. It's just a really interesting, evolving malt. So I'm just going to pour myself a dram. It's got it's definitely got the malty note in this as well, but there's definitely a biscuity side to this. Like sort of a digestive kind of biscuit. You're getting a lot of those original barley notes, and on the palate, you're getting more of that vanilla. You're getting sort of a lemon peel, some sort of light fruits, fresh fruits, orange, and then it's complemented by the vanilla, the oak, the maltiness, the same biscuitiness, quite salty, quite oily. So the Kilkerran is such a great whiskey. I mean, it's only from a small distillery, but it's a really complex whiskey. It evolves in the glass, it develops, and it's quite a reasonable price. I mean, I found this in New Zealand. I thought, you know, it'd probably be a bit harder to find, but I managed to get a bottle. So I hope that you can find a bottle of it near where you are, because I think if you see it, you should probably get it. It's a really great malt and definitely deserves to be in my top whiskies of 2020. And now, before we go to my top whiskey of 2020, we're going to go to a special mention, and that is the Glenfarclas 21-year-old. So I just wanted to add this whiskey as my special mention because it's, well, first of all, it's a 21-year-old, and I actually think there are some 21-year-olds that are probably a better whiskey than this, like the Aaron 21-year-old. But when you change the lens, you put on the lens of value, this is actually a really affordable whiskey. I know most of you have probably never really owned an old whiskey before, and this is 21 years old. So just think about when they actually put this into the cask, you know. It's just crazy to think about that they had this sitting around for so long and that you get to taste a little bit of it. And it teaches you all sorts of things. You know, what does age do to a whiskey? What happens when it's sitting into a cask for that long? What happens when it's sort of drawing that flavour out from a cask for that decent length of time? It's bottled at 43%. I mean, I would probably prefer like the others if it was bottled at 46, but you know, for its age, for its value, it's a really good whiskey and it's hard to leave off this list. And the other thing about Glenfarclas is they're really known for aging in sherry casks, ex-sherry casks, whereas all the other whiskeys so far have been predominantly ex-bourbon casks. This will kind of take you to the sherry world, and you'll see what happens when they do put it into a sherry cask, just how it influences that colour. So already you're seeing just how much darker this is than some of the straw whiskies we had before, which just gives you the indication of the kind of richness that might come out of this whiskey. So I'm just going to add a little bit of water. Because it's been aged for so long, I really want to open this whiskey up because it will take a while to open up. I mean, Ralphie says a year in a cask is a minute in the glass. So, I mean, ideally you want to have this sitting around for half an hour to really see how it evolves, because with old whiskies like this have been sitting in the cask for a long time, I do recommend taking your time, slowing down. This is not a whiskey for shots. This is a whiskey to take your time. So, you know, you can have this almost over a course of an evening, or even pour it during dinner time, and then after dinner time, then start drinking it, because it needs time to develop. So you're just getting all those like deep dried fruits, definitely like red fruits, prunes, sultanas, plums, almost like a Merlot. That's sort of the fruitiness from a Merlot wine. Oh wow. It's so different to the other whiskies I've had. A little bit of toffee, a little bit of caramel. It's just dominated by those red fruits. It's very, very long finish. It's really well balanced. Over time, you're starting to get some of the wood elements coming through as well. Like after the fruits come all through, I'm now starting to get some of those vanilla notes, a tiny bit of maltiness. But yeah, mainly you're still getting those fresh fruits. So just a really, really great whiskey. And if you want to own a whiskey on the shelf that's just a little bit older, that tells you a little bit more about what age does to a whiskey, that's still affordable and within your budget, I think the Glenfarclas 21-year-old is an excellent choice. One of my recommendations for sure. But now let's go to my top whiskey of the year, and that is the Clynelish 14. So here we are. This is my whiskey of the year, the Clynelish 14-year-old. Now this is a fantastic malt. It's a really, really great whiskey. Now it might not be a whiskey that's kind of for beginners, but if you've got a few whiskies on the shelf already, you've got your way around single malt a little bit, I think this is a fantastic whiskey to have on the shelf. And it's just got so much going for it. A good age statement of 14-year-old. It's the ABV is at 46%. You know, my favorite ABV, really good. It means you're getting a lot of flavor out of it. And also, I think it's an underrated whiskey as well. It's the Glencadam. I don't think too many people have tried this whiskey, but it's a really good hidden gem, which is why I want to share it with you, and definitely deserves to be called my top whiskey of 2020. It's also natural color, it's unchill filtered, but let's just try a little dram. For this whiskey as well, I recommend adding just a little bit of water. So on the nose, again, ginger, apricots, sort of a brininess, a little bit of waxiness, kind of a dry vanilla. And what I mean by that is it's kind of, you know, it's not like a sweet ice cream vanilla. It's more like the sort of vanilla bean vanilla. And on the palate, You get more of that vanilla bean. You're getting a little bit of fresh fruit this time. It's apple. You're getting more of that vanilla bean, a little bit of maltiness. It's a really long finish. A little bit of bitterness, getting a bit of tea, and a bit of ginger again. So the Clynelish 14 is just a fantastic malt. It's just so good. Such a good whiskey. But I really hope that you have a great holiday season. And I know a lot of you can't, there's a lot of stuff you can't normally do, the activities and quality restaurants. But now I hope I've given you some good quality malts, my favorite malts that I recommend that are really integrity malts. They've got so much going for them, the complexity. These are whiskies not to just do with shots. These are whiskies to take slow, where the quality just really stands out. But I just also want to say thanks. I want to say thanks for all your support this year. I want to say thanks for supporting this channel, all the comments I get, all the comments on YouTube, all the comments on my Instagram at First Fill Whiskey. I know I went absent a bit after we had a baby and all that sort of thing, but you guys have really inspired me to keep going, and I can't wait to share more whiskey banter and share more whiskey knowledge as we both grow in our whiskey journey together. And so I really hope to see you again in 2021. Hope you have a great holiday season. But above all, share your whiskey and enjoy. Beauty.